Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. While Connectionism was a monumental leap forward, no theory is bulletproof. Over time, critics and new empirical findings exposed limitations, particularly regarding its purely mechanistic view of the learner. A. The mechanistic and reductionist view. Perhaps the most significant criticism is that Connectionism is reductionist and mechanistic. It treats the learner as a passive being whose mind is simply a collection of SR bonds, much like a switchboard where connections are either on or off. Critics argued that this approach fails to account for the rich, internal, and uniquely human processes of cognition, insight, creative problem-solving, abstraction, and consciousness. The cat in the puzzle box eventually found the lever, but did it truly understand the mechanics of the latch? Thorndike's model suggests no. It merely learned to associate the box with the correct action. Subsequent movements like Gestalt psychology, the aha moment, and the later cognitive revolution sought to fill this explanatory gap, arguing that the learner is an active processor of information, not just a reactor to stimuli. B. The efficacy of punishment. As mentioned, Thorndike's own research forced him to walk back the symmetrical nature of the law of effect. He had initially believed punishment was as effective at breaking bonds as reward was at making them. When this turned out to be false, punishment being far less effective and more likely to lead to avoidance, it undermined the core symmetry of his most famous law. The takeaway was clear. Educators should be primarily concerned with arranging the environment to maximize positive reinforcement rather than dwelling on punitive measures for failure. C. The overemphasis on repetition. Early implementations of the law of exercise often devolved into meaningless, rote memorization drills. Critics argued that repetition without understanding or purpose yields brittle, context-specific knowledge that does not generalize well. The law of exercise is truly effective only when combined with the law of effect and the law of readiness. Practice only makes perfect if the practice is satisfying and the learner is ready to engage with the task. Mindless repetition, or what teachers might call busy work, is annoying, violates readiness, and ineffective, lacks a satisfying effect, and thus results in little genuine learning. Despite the theoretical challenges posed by cognitive psychology, Thorndike's work did not just fade away. Instead, it was absorbed, refined, and adapted. His concepts remain the bedrock of instructional practice, especially in skill acquisition. A. The birth of instructional design. Thorndike's scientific approach, the focus on measurable SR bonds, objective observation, and quantified results, made him the spiritual grandfather of instructional design. When modern educators and trainers set out to define specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, smart learning objectives, they are essentially defining the precise SR bonds they wish to form. The structured, sequential, feedback-driven process of modern training programs, from corporate onboarding to complex flight simulator instruction, is purely connectionist in its architecture. They are all about ensuring readiness, practicing the connection, and giving immediate reinforcing feedback, the effect. B. Mastery learning and personalized education. The concept of mastery learning, which insists that all students can and should achieve a high level of competence before advancing, is deeply rooted in the law of effect and the law of readiness. Mastery learning essentially institutionalizes the law of readiness by ensuring the student is perpetually ready for the next step because they have successfully mastered the current one, thus maximizing the satisfying effect of learning. Personalized education models, which allow students to move at their own pace, are fundamentally about respecting each individual's state of readiness and optimizing the opportunity for successful, reinforcing SR bond formation. C. The connection to cognitive science. While the cognitive revolution moved past the purely behavioral explanations, it did not discard Thorndike's work. Instead, it reinterpreted it. The SR bonds can be seen as early, rough descriptors for schema, neural networks, or memory pathways. When a cognitive psychologist talks about activating prior knowledge, readiness, encoding a concept, effect, or retrieving a skill, exercise, they are discussing the internal, mental equivalence of Thorndike's laws. His work provided the essential empirical starting point for understanding how input leads to stable, repeatable output, which is central to all learning theories. In this sense, Thorndike's mechanistic model was the necessary prerequisite for developing the more sophisticated internal models we use today. Thorndike's connectionism theory, born in the early experimental psychology labs, offered the world its first robust, data-backed understanding of the mechanics of learning. By framing learning as the simple, gradual, and highly influential strengthening of bonds between stimuli and responses, Thorndike provided educators with actionable principles that hold water even now. The laws of effect, readiness, and exercise, along with their supplementary counterparts, provided a foundational framework for ensuring student success. Lessons must be rewarding, effect, developmentally appropriate, readiness, and practiced judiciously, exercise. In the contemporary educational landscape, where the buzzwords are personalized learning, instructional design, and measurable outcomes, the essence of connectionism is everywhere. While we have since integrated complex cognitive explanations, Thorndike's core insight that the consequence of an action determines its future recurrence remains the single most important principle in shaping behavior and learning. Thorndike did more than just establish a theory. He gave educators the necessary tools to stop flying by the seat of their pants and start building learning environments based on scientific proof. His legacy is the enduring challenge to every teacher to diligently ensure that every lesson is timely, every practice is meaningful, and every effort is met with the satisfying state of success.